The marquee might be a little light, and that is when the unexpected can happen. This is the College Game Day Podcast for Friday, October 27th. Rece Davis, Stanford Steve with you. Pete Thamel has the day off, but I will assure you of this. Pete is still in this picks competition. We trust his integrity to the utmost. He will send in his picks prior to the first kickoff of the game on Saturday, and they will count in the standings. However, if Pete has an excellent day, Steve and I will decide how much he has to be penalized for not actually making the picks when we do here. Steve, how are you doing? You had a solid 500 week while Pete and I scuffled with 2 and 6 calls. How did things go on the fridge for College Game Day last week?
I'll just let you know, Rece. 3 of the games appeared in bad beats.
Oh no! Oh
yeah.
no!
Yeah.
3.
It was one of those. Those 3 of those. Yeah.
That's
Illinois.
were you at least 1 and 3? You weren't 0-3 and 1.
Yeah, yeah. We stayed up till the wee hours to make sure UCLA got home against Stanford. But I mean, Illinois up 21-7, getting 3. Loses and
throws a touchdown pass to an offensive lineman.
Yeah. It's all in the old bad beat from Monday night. Scott had some fun with that. And what was our god awful other pick? It was
I'm trying to remember what was on.
Illinois. Army did not have a chance. UCLA.
No, Army never had a chance. That was not a bad beat. That was just a beat.
Did you see how I lost Superdog?
Wait, who was your super dog?
Navy. Down 17.
I did. It was 10.5. It was 10.5, right? They lost by 11.
Yes.
2-point conversion attempt.
Why? What are we doing? Oh, just horrendous.
What did we had this will be the first mention of legendary SportsCenter producer Rob Guajaro. And way back in the day when I would do the late SportsCenter in the summer, in the middle of baseball season, sometimes if a West Coast game, went into extra innings, you had to wait until the end so that you get the score on and be able to tape it for the morning re-airs back when they did the continuous morning re-airs. And Robbie G, you'd get this in your ear on talkback, and he would go, "The Dodgers have been put on this earth to screw me," right? It's sort of
I know.
It's sort of like the 2-point conversion. The fridge games have been put on this earth to vex you for some reason.
It's unbelievable. Doing pretty well on the podcast here, but
doing great.
Yeah, only people want to know about the fridge. I will add to that light, knowing that we are still in those summer hours of late SportsCenter with baseball. And as much as I hate it and people hate it, the Ghost Man on second has helped the late SportsCenter a lot for those baseball games. No more 20-inning games. It has been, everybody hates it, but there's a thing in the back of my mind like, all right, well, it's going to help us, I think, get out of here sooner, knowing we got to be here till the end of the game. So, a little inside sport. That's funny. Everybody has their feelings about late night baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how I feel about that. The independent league, independent professional league that my son Christopher played in this year, they have an even more expeditious way of games that go into extra innings because they're trying to be the USPBO, United Shore Professional Baseball League, wants to be family friendly, so they want to play in a finite period of time. So when they go to extra innings, they meet at home plate and there's a coin toss. And if you win the coin toss, you get to choose whether to go on offense or defense. You have a runner on first. If you choose to go on defense with a runner on first and you keep that run from scoring, you win. If you go on offense, if you score the run, you win. And, it's sort of a different twist on the Ghost Man on second.
What do the analytics say on that of what people choose more?
It sort of depends, but the analytics slightly favor going on defense. I think
that's fascinating.
And you know what the other thing is, what I think, and don't hold me to this in a court of law, Steve, but I believe, because everybody immediately starts yelling bunt, bunt, bunt,
Yeah.
right? Your win expectancy actually diminishes slightly if you bunt the runner to second and they record the out.
Yeah.
So it's the old school people want to bunt them into scoring position, but sometimes you're better to hit a double. It's like
because I would think the numbers treat that as you're trailing too, because you have to score to win.
Yeah,
and that's in a whole tier.
Yeah, it's like Christopher's coach and this is the last Sun baseball story I'll give here.
We want more.
His coach at Princeton, Scott Bradley, who played forever in the big leagues and caught Randy Johnson's first no-hitter. Scooter actually hit the ball that Bo Jackson threw out Harold Reynolds, I think, at the plate with. I think Scooter hit that ball. But at any rate, when they would talk about, doing things like taking one for the team and getting hit by pitches, Scoot would say, "Yeah, I like guys that get out of the way and then hit a double." So sometimes
it's a lot more problems.
Instead of bunting a guy over, let's just hit a double. So let's hit some doubles here with some picks.
Yeah,
we will add Pete's picks in. And they'll be hermetically sealed in a mayonnaise jar in Ottumwa, Iowa, or someplace, and then revealed next week and entered into record. But let's start with this. Taylor, call out the games and let's make some picks.
You got it. It's the race for the ribeye. The stakes are week 9. For last week, Rece mentioned it briefly. Steve went 4-4. Rece and Pete went 2-6. Steve, 8 games over 500. Rece, 3 games under 500. Pete, we'll be nice to him today. We won't even mention where he's at in the standings, but there you go.
Hey, Taylor, let's do this. Steve mentioned in passing a minute ago that he's doing pretty well here as opposed to the fridge, which has been vexing him. I will say this, Steve, if you're doing pretty well, but you do fall into the Paul Feinbaum category if you're competing against Pete and me. And Steve ain't picked against nobody, Paul. Come on.
Against who?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, Taylor. Go ahead.
Oh, boy. All right, let's go to the games here. Oklahoma, a 10-point favorite on the road at Kansas. That game kicks off at noon. Let's go Rece and then Steve.
Steve, this, Oklahoma, was a big favorite at home against UCF last week, didn't cover it, almost messed around and got beaten. Desmond Howard texted me last night, just really late, and said, "What did you say to Gus Malzahn at the end that made him grin?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't remember. So I pulled up the video of the show, and what I said on the way out that made Gus sort of grin slyly that we didn't pick up on at the time, I guess, even though we acknowledged the grin.
He's had a lot of success.
I said he's had a lot of upsets. And he almost had another one. So I feel a little bit like you're chasing or overreacting if you go against Oklahoma in this spot. Jalen Daniels, it appears, not ready. Although that's been dicey for a while. They'll go back to Jason Bean, he's played a lot of ball and he can be a really effective player. I think Oklahoma will probably get out of there with the win, but I think Kansas is pretty good. There's some struggles defensively. I think they're going to be able to keep up. I'm going to take the Jayhawks and the 10 points with the chance with the early start upset. But I'm not willing to lay the 10 with Oklahoma, even though I am a little worried that I'm chasing the vibe and the where they're headed after that near miss against UCF last week.
Yeah, Kansas off a bye too. I do like also Rece. The last time out, they lost to that upstart Oklahoma State team that seems like they found something offensively. It's amazing. Gundy finds offense. The guy is incredible. Keep doubting him. But anyway, I look at what Kansas did to that UCF team. I get it. They weren't at full strength, but that was probably their best game of the year. They put up a 50-burger, beat them by 29. And when I look at Kansas, the reason I thought there would be regression this year is that defensive line, not creating sacks, not creating negative plays. They're coming in only allowing 396 yards. Now, this is a whole different animal, but they've been an upstart group, and at home, early kick. You saw what UCF did that. Oklahoma, too, I think, was in the middle of a 2-week hangover, beating their rival and coming out as a 17-point favorite. So I agree with you. I'm going to take the points with Kansas at home. I totally think Oklahoma wins the game, but I think double digits, that's too many points for Leipold off a bye, knowing the capability of that team.
We'll stay in the Big 12 here. BYU headed to Austin, Texas, a 17.5-point favorite, but no Quinn Ewers. Interesting game here. Let's go Steve and then Rece.
Yeah, a lot of history too. Fun stuff depending on what side you're on in this game. BYU having success. They were the answer to the Aflac trivia question. We were at the Red River is who's one of the two couple teams that has a winning record against Texas and Oklahoma. So BYU is not going to be intimidated. I really am excited to see Malik Murphy. I thought Sark, the way he went about this whole Arch hype during going back to spring ball, because when you look at it, he had Ewers, a lot of questions. Malik was the star of the spring game, and then you had the aura or Arch, and Sark put his foot in the ground, said, Quinn's the guy, this is Quinn's team. Now you look at the setup, Malik's the guy, Arch will be ready, he said. Arch will have everything on his plate, and when you look at it, if Malik struggles, now what kind of position is Sark in, knowing the pressure that people want to see Arch? I trust Sark in this situation. BYU has just been a thorn in my side. I totally forgot about them last week, being back at home. Lubbock, not really familiar with what Provo's all about, and they were the right side, BYU. So shout out to them getting there. But I'll take BYU plus a lot of points. I think there's a lot of feeling out process. Now, I will not be surprised at all if you see Malik look incredible. Sark now knowing what he has, as good as there is as a schemer, play caller, now with Malik and knowing his abilities, that he has more athletic ability than Quinn Ewers, this could be exciting if you're Texas. So I think they handle business, but I'll take the 17.5.
It's a lot of points, and the logic tells me to take BYU with the new quarterback. But if you watch Texas spring game with Malik Murphy, and even with, I had someone tell me the other day, hey, they've rotated, or not pure rotation, but evaluated weekly who the backup to Quinn Ewers is. And some weeks it's been Arch Manning as opposed to Malik. So what are they going to do at quarterback? There's been a lot of positive buzz, as you alluded to, about Malik Murphy, and there was some evidence of it in that spring game in which they played. There's the Sark alma mater angle. There's the angle that you mentioned it's sort of astonishing that Texas is 1-4 against BYU. That's the worst record against any team they've played at least 5 times. There's the Manny Diaz story when Taysom Hill personally ran for 1 million yards in a single game against Texas and basically got Manny fired on the way back to the airport by Mac Brown less than 24 hours after the game. They literally gave up 550 yards rushing to them in that game. All that's old history, but the reason history matters is that somehow, some way, in inexplicable ways, it can create confidence. When you play, BYU is not afraid of anybody. I think Murphy's going to play well. If this were just a little bit smaller, I'd take Texas to cover it. But I'm going to take BYU in the points, and I think you and I are in lockstep here. I'm taking BYU because the number is just so big, and you haven't seen Murphy play.
Oh man.
I suspect he's going to be terrific.
Yeah.
It's too much for me to take, and it's going to be one of those that Thamel talks about all the time. When it's 21-0 in the first quarter, and he's thrown 2 touchdown passes and got out the gate on a scramble, you're going to go, what was I thinking? But I'm gonna take BYU in the points.
Texas defense has to play better than they did last week too, and Malik has been picked apart because of his effort last week. But that's a brutal situation going into that kind of environment. Little brother, syndrome, and the defense on up 21-0, that whole thing. So I don't feel great about it, but I will take the points.
Hey, by the way, brutal spot.
Oh.
Just a brutal spot on that third down play for Houston. And when they stopped the game every 2 seconds for this, that, or the other, how they didn't, I mean, I know they review every play, but how that wasn't evaluated or explained sort of is mind-boggling. Now, who knows? Maybe Houston doesn't score anyway. Yeah. But I did not think watching that game, I was shocked. First, I was shocked they didn't just call it a first down.
Yeah,
on the field.
And
exactly. Then when they didn't,
that would solve everything.
Are they going to look at this again? And they didn't. But I'm not a big fan of looking at spots anyway, unless it's really egregious. So, call it on the field. But anyway, a lot of things went against Houston late, went in Texas' favor. But I'm going to go BYU and not be at all surprised when when the final score is 45-14 or something.
The world's largest outdoor cocktail party has Georgia a 14.5-point favorite in Jacksonville against Florida. That kicks off at its standard 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's hear from Rece and then Steve.
24 in a row for the Dogs. They won 17 straight against opponents within their division. Their last loss was to the Gators in 2020. And then with the Brock Bowers story being out and Carson Beck coming back to Duval, the Jacksonville kid who we'll hear from on College Game Day Saturday. And Florida might be improving a little bit here. Beck at one time, I learned this week. I knew he was a highly recruited guy. He at one time was a Florida commit in baseball. He was committed to them as a baseball pitcher. Flipped to Georgia. I think he also might have been committed to Alabama as a football player at some point in there too. I think this guy's really improving. I think Georgia having the week off is big. This game historically is weird because you have a pretty rich history of one side spoiling things for the other, knocking them out of stuff, dating all the way back. One of the reasons that Spurrier had the contempt that he had for Georgia was that in his Heisman Trophy winning season, they were undefeated until they lost to Georgia. 10 years later, Florida, which, people of a certain age don't realize that Florida was nothing until Spurrier got there. They were the sleeping giant that no one could ever awaken. But in 76, they had a chance to win their first ever SEC championship, and Georgia beat them. They had a infamous 4th and dumb call. They called it. They had a lead and they went for it on 4th and 1 in their own 29. They ended up getting beat. 85, Florida #1, first time in school history. Dogs destroyed them. And it's gone both ways over the years. This is like the perfect spot for Florida to do this to Georgia, and I just don't believe it. So I'm going to take the Dogs and lay the points even without Brock Bowers.
A couple things here. When you look at Georgia, I thought you see, as much as Kirby wants to play and find the motivation, you saw the confidence where it was, hey, Brock, go take care of this, get the surgery. We got the Dogs to handle this situation, whether it's 3 weeks, whether it's 4. This tightrope thing is different for everybody, and everybody goes back to Tua and how fast he came back. He's a quarterback. This guy is the best player possibly in the sport, and he needs to be 100%. So I thought that was interesting. But when I look at this stretch for Georgia, Rece, it's tougher than I believe people are making it out to be. They got Florida, you get Missouri coming in, and you get Ole Miss coming in. And when you look at Georgia, obviously, the defense isn't what it has been. And it's not fair to compare this group to groups of past, knowing the NFL guys that they've had. So I am in a mindset here with this stretch that they're not going to cover all these games. And then when I look at this game specifically, I'm trying to be simple about it. I look at what Georgia did with Bowers at Auburn. I get it. Jordan Hare, phenomenal setup. That place was spectacular that day. Auburn's in the lead, second half lead in the game the whole time. I firmly believe Florida's a better football team. I firmly believe that staff knows what's at stake and they will be fully prepared. Will they hold up for 60 defensively? That's the question, but I believe they do, and I'm not overthinking this. I'm taking the 14.5 with a capable Florida team.
I sort of switch back and forth. You know what I can't get out of my head, because my initial instinct, Steve, was to take Florida. I can't get Ray Davis running wild out of my head. And I know Georgia hasn't run the ball the way you might have expected, but they might. We're going to see if they get Amarius Mims back on the offensive line, who's also, I think, coming off the tightrope surgery. They've got a tight end, Lawson Lucky, who had tightrope surgery, who's coming back.
Waiting to see him.
Yeah. So it's but at the end of the day, the thing I can't get out of my mind is Kentucky just running on them. And so that's why I can't trust the Gators yet, but I do suspect, like you, that they are improved. And this is an all hands on deck, because don't forget one other little thing here. We're talking about this stretch for Georgia. If Florida wins this game, they've got the head-to-head tiebreaker for the trip to the SEC championship game on their side, because they only have one conference loss, that loss to Kentucky.
And the same thing for Missouri next week if they were to do it, right?
Exactly.
So
no,
it's not one of these gauntlets, but I think we're going to find out a lot about Georgia, and Michigan keeps, stacking more votes than they have the week previous. It's all coming together just like we thought it would. We just had to wait a little bit longer than normal season, which is fine. We like that, having more teams in the mix. But yeah, this is a fun 3-week stretch here. I should say I can't include the trip to Knoxville, because that'll be bonkers no matter what their record is. So yeah, this is fun. This is really fun, and should be a good one.
Game day in the house for this one in Salt Lake City. Oregon, a 7-point favorite on the road against Utah in a battle of one-loss Pac-12 teams. Got to win this one if you want to keep pace with the Huskies. Let's go, Steve, and then Rece for this one.
Rece, I'm looking at this. Obviously, there's been some wild games in this. You have the knocking out of the ball, late in Salt Lake City that cost the game. We've seen Utah go to Oregon and win. Last year, Bo Nix showed me a ton, not being 100% and gutting out that win against Utah. And I could be a different feeling after I get into the tape and watching the Oregon more defensively, because when I look at the matchup, you watch Utah's offense last week, and all credit to them. Not now that it's settled and they have their quarterback, the defense in Southern California just didn't want any part of lining up constantly. And Oregon's not going to be that. Oregon is going to bring it. You see it with the mentality of their head coach. We saw what they look like in a brutal environment in Seattle. So I expect Oregon to play really well. A touchdown's a lot. Utah's going to have some intangibles. The Bucky Irving thing, I thought Lanning got away with, saying he came in for a secure win, kneel down, and that he'll be good to go. But anybody could do that. If you're just going to be standing there as the safety back on that play. So I am leaning Oregon right now. So I will take the -7. I could easily be flipped by the time this game kicks off and we're on the sidelines.
Okay, so you're taking Oregon and laying the points?
Yes,
okay.
I am.
I'm done doubting Utah. I think Oregon's the better team, and I think they're going to win the game, but I'm not totally convinced of it. And when you're in that situation with a team that is as ill-tempered in a good way as Utah is, and you're giving me a touchdown in that place with that team, with that coach, I'm going to take Utah in the points. My instinct is that Oregon is going to pull out a close game, because I still believe Oregon is good enough and capable of winning the national championship. They'll have to lose again before I back off that assertion, but they better come ready for a fight. And I don't mean come ready for a game. They better come ready for a fight, because they're going to get it. And I think this will be one of the most physical, toughest games of the season. Oregon plays with a swagger and an edge, and Utah plays with a nasty, quiet confidence. This is a football game for football people. And I'm going to take Utah Utah at home in the points. I suspect Oregon finds a way, largely on the strength of probably, as much as I respect Bryson Barnes and the pig farmer and the great run and all of this great stuff that's happened, coming back and taking the job back. The edge at quarterback goes to Oregon. I think that's going to make the difference in the end. Bo making his 55th start, most in college football history. I'll take Oregon to get the win, but Utah to get the cover.
I know it's going to be chilly when we go on the air Saturday from Salt Lake City. It is wet. It warms up for kickoff, right? It's not going to be, a brutally cold. I thought I saw like 50s for kickoff of this game. I shouldn't do this on the spot weather. Well, I'm not a weather guy, but
I'll look at it. I'll look at it right here. I think you're right in that. Okay, the high. Well, you know what? The high on Saturday is going to be 44, but it's not as if Oregon comes from Los Angeles. So
exactly.
I just okay with that.
I didn't know if it was extremely cold. So that's vest and jacket for us, right on the sidelines.
Pack the long johns. Last week I started with it. That is the mistake you make a lot of times. You get seduced into all of this nice early fall weather, and you forget that it flips on you fast. So last week I popped it in my head. I was okay. From this point forward, they at least go in the travel bag. So they'll be in there, and because I'd much rather be hot than cold.
No doubt.
I will be in long johns for sure. Saturday morning, Salt Lake City.
Who had Duke and Louisville on their ACC bingo card for a meaningful game here in late October? The Blue Devils headed to Louisville. Louisville a 4-point favorite. This kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go Rece and then Steve.
If not for Louisville's faceplant against Pittsburgh, I think it's highly likely that College Game Day would have been in Louisville because they would have been undefeated.
They've been chomping at the bit.
Well, I know, but I mean, if you
got to take care of business.
If you're not good enough, a loss will find you. Go. And I do not mean that Louisville's not good. Just saying, well, they should win this game because they're slightly better than this team in their schedule. They missed this team and they're going to go undefeated. That's the whole concept of if you're not good enough, a loss will find you. Louisville has 4-point favorite there against a Duke team coming off a really tough loss at Florida State in which they fought their guts out. Riley Leonard again fought his tail off. That ankle obviously is still an issue there for them. The one thing about this is Duke in that exceptional, excellent, fast pass defense. They don't have a ton of interceptions, sort of middle of the pack. They've got 6 of them. Do have more interceptions than touchdown passes allowed. And Louisville has been benevolent in throwing interceptions. I think Plummer's thrown 8 of them on the season. So I really believe in Elko. I don't know. I don't have a great feel for outright winning this game, but if you're going to give me maybe, I don't know Leonard's status off the top of my head. I assume if he gave it a go against Florida State, he's going to give it a go here. You're giving me 4 with that defense and maybe with him. I'm going to take Duke in the points.
Okay. I worry about this situation with Duke and Riley Leonard because you easily get talked into the moment, and especially when you're up 20-17 in Tallahassee and your best player, your most valuable player is not 100%, and you've gotten to that point and he just couldn't do it. And I worry with those high ankles if it's a setback, because when you look back at how they handled it, I get it. You're in the moment in Tallahassee. You think you can win every game with this team and the confidence they have in that locker room. But now, did you set it back where now you're not going to have them for a more winnable game? That's the worry I have here for Duke. It didn't look great when he was walking off. Those things are tricky. And again, for him to be effective, he needs to be at least 90%, knowing how capable he is running the football. So I don't love it. I thought it was interesting. Elko, Scott and I played the sound on the show last week. He talked about going to Tallahassee and being on that stage again. And that stage is primetime TV. They had it against Notre Dame. We were there. And they responded. They played great. They couldn't hold it. And then last week was exactly what I thought. If that offense couldn't be sustainable the defense was going to be on the field too much, and that's a great defense, great scheme, great players. And Florida State just has more guys offensively, and they roll out and shut them out in the fourth and end up covering that game, which is also a rough beat if you had Duke getting all those points. So I don't love it. You talked about the inconsistency, Louisville turning the ball over. That's not a recipe you want to play against Duke, because they'll take it from you and then keep the ball away from you running the football. So I don't love it. I'm just going to take the home team with Louisville. The bias of seeing them and how they played against Notre Dame in prime time is the deciding factor for me. So I expect Brom to have his guys ready to go. I'll take -4 with Louisville.
Tennessee, a 3.5-point favorite at Kentucky this weekend. That game kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go, Steve, and then we'll hear from Rece.
Vulnerable Vols. The vulnerable Vols are on the road, and I just don't like what I've seen from Tennessee. Haven't loved what I've seen from Kentucky either. In a spot where it felt like Stoops never loses that game to Missouri. You're at home, tight spread, comparative rosters, and a great special teams call ends up just catapulting Missouri to that win, and then you see what they do in the following week. Like, they got it cooking. But when I look at Kentucky and what they trust in a night game in Lexington, I see a field goal game. So it's a 3.5. Again, that's why I didn't like Tennessee last week. I think that was actually a game we differed on. You thought Bama wins, Tennessee covers. I just thought Bama over 60 would take care of business, and they ended up covering with the scoop and score in the fourth quarter. So I look at Kentucky as a back against the wall. They're normally very good in this spot. So I'm going to take the home team plus the points.
Well, you were half right. Bama took care of business over the last 30. I mean, that was the remarkable second half performance from Alabama against Tennessee. This is where my historical bias comes into play. It's Tennessee against Kentucky, and Tennessee always wins. I mean, Mark Stoops, they would build a statue to him simply because he's won 2 times in 10 games against the Vols, which is well above average historically. Tennessee's won like 35 of the last 38 meetings on average over the last, half century, if not longer. Kentucky gets them once a decade. But there are more tangible reasons here in which I favor Tennessee. I'm just not convinced that you're going to be able to run the ball consistently against Tennessee without the threat of hitting them with a big pass, which is what Alabama did and eventually loosened up the running game to some degree and ran the quarterback, which is not something that, Kentucky is necessarily strong at. They are strong in running, but maybe not with the quarterback too. And we haven't seen evidence of a big passing game yet. So, Tennessee, I think, will still be able to run the ball some, even against that strong Kentucky defense. And I'm going to take Tennessee because I don't know that Kentucky has the necessary weapons in the passing game to loosen it up enough for Ray Davis to get loose. This is a strong on strong, good on good. Tennessee is the best running team in the SEC, and Kentucky's second in the SEC in rush defense. So this is a strong suit game. It's certainly one that would elevate Kentucky's status both for bowls in the postseason and in perception, and could really put Tennessee in danger of taking a step back after that great year last year. If Tennessee follows the loss in Tuscaloosa with a loss to Kentucky and with Georgia and Missouri, I believe, still looming.
Yep.
They're in danger of really taking a significant step back. So I'm going to say the Big Orange comes through. It's a tough, hard-fought, physical game, but I'll take Tennessee in that one.
Next up, we've got the intra-conference divisional disparity bowl with Ohio State, a 14.5-point favorite, heading to Wisconsin. That kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go, Rece, and then Steve.
Wisconsin feels as if it turned the corner. Luke Fickell felt that way after rallying against Illinois. But my question is, why in the world are you in position to have to rally against Illinois? It's a feel good moment for sure. And I know the Buckeyes are still figuring some things out offensively outside of throw it to 18, which should be the first line of the game plan. Should be throw it to 18. Am I in trouble? Throw it to 18. Am I wanting to put the game away? Throw it to 18. Is he single covered? Throw it to 18. If he's double covered, well, does he have a half step? Throw it to 18. Get the ball to him. Run some more him plays. When in doubt, throw the ball to him. Him being Marvin Harrison Jr. I just don't see Wisconsin scoring enough to stay within there. I'll take Ohio State and lay it pretty easily.
One of the best atmospheres I've ever been at was number 1 Ohio State going to Madison on a Saturday night. J.J. Watt's here, Terrell Pryor at quarterback for Ohio State, and it was, like I said, as good as I've been to. And that's what I found interesting. I thought this would be a big noon game, but it's not. It's a night game. I agree with you. You talk to people around Wisconsin, it's crazy. They still are figuring things out. What personnel to play defensively, which ways, how do we want to go about defending things? And to see them not be able to do a thing offensively for the better part of the year and then score 15 points in the fourth quarter and come back and win on the road against their former coach, it was impressive. But you touched on it. That defense for Ohio State is the difference. They are lethal. I know James Franklin got crushed for saying those are both championship teams. Those are championship defenses, those two teams last week that we were on the field. I mean, there are wait till all those names are available for the draft, and you will see guys from that game on that side of the ball all over the place. So I think that's a defense that will travel. They keep the pressure on you. Hall up front just continues to get better. He's the guy I questioned coming into the season. We knew about the edge guys, but the secondary's rounding it for him. Obviously it's going to be a weekly thing with the Ohio State offensive guys, the difference makers they have coming up, with injuries. But McCord has played in a hostile environment. So, pulled it together in South Bend when we were there. So it's tough. I hate giving double digits on the road, but I'm going to do it with Ryan Day and that staff. I trust in him to get some belief. And I think they found a lot last week. That's a tough game. And they've won some tough games, and we know how much he feels about his team's toughness. So I'll lay the double digits with Ohio State.
Next up, UNLV at Fresno State. Fresno State a 7.5 point favorite. This kicks off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go, Steve, and then Rece.
I absolutely love what Barry Odom's done in a spot that, good Lord, if we could somehow, I don't think there's a graphic big enough, Rece, for the show to show how bad UNLV football has been. And to see them on this stage, and I get it, people aren't familiar with the Mountain West and shit. I'm not even familiar with UNLV, seeing them on top of this for as long as they've been there this year. And it's awesome. It really is. Like, you think about, go to UNLV and win. It's a great place to play. You got an NFL stadium. Plenty of guys have come in, and it's just not gone well. Well, when you look up at this step up now you're playing the big name in your conference. Now we really see UNLV is a team that went to Michigan, and I don't think they got a first down until the third quarter earlier in the year. It's a different team now. I don't know if they win the game, but I'll take UNLV plus the points.
I agree with everything you said about Odom, and you referenced the Michigan game. That's the only game they've lost.
Yeah.
But a man called Jose Pisano had to kick the ball through the upright 6 times. That's a McAfee dream game. 6 field goals for Vegas to beat Colorado State. But the fact that they held down a Colorado State offense that has been putting up some numbers, albeit sometimes they throw you the ball too, sort of is indicative of Barry Odom's DNA and what he's done as an assistant coach, Missouri, Arkansas, different places that he's been in terms of implementing the defense. They've got a really good defense. But I think this is where it ends. I'm tempted to take the points, not the season ends, but in terms of the one loss and unbeaten in Mountain West play. I'm going to go with Fresno State home. Okay. a little bit better offense. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to get it done in the Valley with the green V on the back of the headgears, and say the Fresno State covers that barely, but Vegas will make them work for it. And Odom deserves Coach of the Year consideration, or at least a half-year Coach of the Year for what the improvement that he's been able to execute in Vegas.
Yeah, that's a different scene late night in Fresno.
Oh yeah,
it'll get weird, no doubt.
Tough place to play for sure. So, I don't know where I'm going for the Superdog, but the man who gets in his Superdog first every week, earliest, oftentimes on Monday, took the one already that I was planning to go with on Saturday. Lee Corso has already snagged a Superdog off the board that I was going with. Home dog, getting double-digit points, and now I've got to find some other place to go. How did you? Let's see. You lost your Superdog on the half point, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I got I whipped Eastern Michigan home for the cover. Thought they had a chance to win.
They were leading that game, right?
Yeah, they were.
Irby got on the board.
Yeah, he did. That was. I tell you what, we don't. As Famo often says, we don't root. But I got to tell you, I really didn't need UCF to win as a 20-point underdog or whatever they were, and for Herbie to all of a sudden jump up to a 25 on the board.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess we get him off the 0 and leave him at the 5. It's okay.
Let's leave him down there.
Yeah, so there you go. All right, Steve, always a pleasure, man. We'll see how we do. Pete's picks will be sent in to Taylor and Sarah. They will make sure that there's no malfeasance going on, that there's been no spying on our picks to try to pick against them or anything of that sort. And we'll have Pete's record coming up next week. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of this extravaganza. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy your college football weekend.